This is a ManeHustle Media podcast. Hi, and welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka Mixed Girl Maine. And before we jump into episode 8 with Danielle Earl, just a couple feelings. I just want to talk about some feelings I'm having. Last week, I think it was, I joined a Facebook community group called Black Podcasters Unite. Shout out to everybody in that group. And man, in this 2 weeks, the amount of support and love and just helpfulness that I've received, not just me directly, but that I've also witnessed through the back and forth chats on both the Facebook group and we have a Twitter group as well, has been amazing. And so I really wanted to shout them out. And I haven't gotten to everybody yet, but there's a few of y'all who I am listening to and hope to kind of be able to plug your podcast down the line. First one that comes to the top of my head is a single simulcast with Derek Jones. I think he started the group, and actually he and I went to high school together, but we didn't know each other. That was just something random we discovered. And Mocha Minutes, that is also another podcaster in that group, and she's pretty awesome. And so check out those shows. Sorry to all the other ones who I haven't named, but I'm still trying to get to your podcast. Geek Philosophy, Stays Crunchy and Milk, I think is one of them. Ungentrified, by Black. So yeah, I'm trying to work my way through all of those podcasts and trying to shout them out to folks. So if you are listening to this show and you want to find new podcasts to listen to, those ones that I named, you can check them out on iTunes or Stitcher and Google Play, SoundCloud, whatever. Subscribe, rate, and review for them, because not only are they delivering podcasts out to the world, they are also being super supportive of other Black podcasters, and I just want to shout out to all of them. And yeah, I mean, I guess I can't believe that this summer is almost over and how insanely fast it went by. We launched Black Radical Queer, the first podcast that kind of dropped under ManeHustle Media banner on June. It was either the 26th or 29th, whatever the last Wednesday of June was. And we launched the first episode of Militantly Mixed on July 5th. And then just last week, Blurred Vision and I decided to create an entirely new podcast in the Militantly Mixed family called the Black as Fuck Edition. That dropped last week. Episode 1 of that show is episode 7 of this show. So go ahead and check it out. That was sort of the original vision. That version of the show is sort of the original vision that Blurred Vision and I had when we were first talking about doing Militantly Mixed. But as you've heard several times, we had schedule conflicts. We couldn't really make it work when I was finally had time and was ready to do Militantly Mixed. So I ended up launching the interview version of the show, which has given me so much life. Getting a chance to connect with all these mixed race people around the world has been insane. I mean, we're only in episode 8, but I'm actually on interview 17, or individual 17, but I've talked to some of these people multiple times. And these new relationships that I've been lucky enough to form as a result of the podcast has been crazy. I have been getting messages on Twitter and Instagram, a couple of emails, but it's usually Twitter and Instagram, Facebook as well. People who have listened to the show and have said, the show has really helped them feel seen, or now they realize that they're not actually alone in the world, that they're not something, that there's other people like them. And a couple of them have choked me up. I'm not going to lie. There's one in particular this week. She reached out to me on Twitter. I'm not going to drop her name, but she sent me a lengthy explanation about her background and how different it was from anything she's heard on the show so far, but that the show has really resonated with her. And I'm grateful that people are taking the time to even listen to the show, let alone actually send me these, beautiful messages about the impact the show is having on them and telling me about their background. So that leads me to my plea, which is, if you have or have not reached out to me yet, but you are a fan of the show and the show is giving you something, please reach out to me and come on the show. we got to tell these stories. We need representation. We are an extremely underrepresented group in media and everything, in jobs, in positions of power, stuff like that. So that's what we're doing this show for. We're trying to push representation for mixed race people. We're trying to help mixed race people not feel alone in the world. And just because in your pocket there's not many people that look like you or are mixed like you, they are out there in the world, and they're ready to hear your story, just like you've been ready to hear theirs. So if you are interested in coming on the show and sharing your stories with us, hit me up on email at charmaine@militantlymixed.com, and that's S as in Sam, HARMANE @militantlymixed.com. So send me an email and we can get set up so that we can have a Skype interview to share your stories. That's how I'm doing it. You don't even have to leave your house. That's how I talked to Mixed Up Mama in the UK and a future episode James in Vienna. I got another interview coming up in the UK this week. Let's see, I've talked to people all over the United States so far. Canada with John Corbin in our first episode. So it doesn't have to be an inconvenience. It's just an hour of your time on Skype with me talking about being mixed. So if you're interested, please hit me up. Also continue to send me messages through Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, because that is keeping me going and keeping me on the right path, because this is it's a show for you, and I want you to get what you need out of it. And don't forget that Militantly Mixed is a fan-sponsored show, so if the show is giving you life, or you are getting something out of it, and you want to help keep us going, you can go to Patreon, www.patreon.com/militantlymixed, where you can subscribe for monthly sponsorship for as low as $1 a month to as high as whatever you want. You'll have access to exclusive or early content and show swag. As the show develops, I'll get more stuff on there. But all your donations will help us with hosting fees, help us improve our equipment over time, things like that. There is also, we finally did get a PayPal donate me button, which I've had a few people reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram about. So thank you for actually even asking how to give us money. That's amazing. But that address is paypal.me/militantlymixed. So if you want to give us a one-time donation to keep us going, that is paypal.me/militantlymixed. All right. I think that's enough. Let's get into the episode. So this episode I got to speak with Danielle Earl, who is a film producer in the greater New York area. She's one of the early people that I got to speak with. So this is actually an interview that was recorded in June, and it actually does feel like an interview, a little bit more question and answery than some of my most recent conversations. And as y'all know, I have been playing these interviews sort of out of order. So this is also one from before I think I even had any equipment yet. I think I was just going off of my my headphones and my laptop. I was still like laying in my bed with a chair pillow and a TV dinner tray that I had my laptop on. My cats are running around. So, you know, sometimes there's some audio things and it's hella loud or whatever. But I needed to dig myself out of that non-creative hole. So we started the podcast before we had shit to start it with. Danielle is amazing to talk to. She focuses, or a lot of the work that she has done, things that she has produced, do have some sort of a diversity or inclusion aspect to them. You know, those are the projects that she becomes passionate about. She's actually the person who also connected me to Melissa Guzman from episode 2 on their series Complexity. Danielle is one of the producers on that show, and Melissa Guzman is the writer-director. So Danielle is great. We talk about all kinds of stuff related to, you know, her background and film production, things like that, which is something she and I share in common. It was just good. It's just a good old talk. And actually, it was a super long talk, so I cut out a big old portion out of it because I'm going to use that for a later episode. But for now, here is a more reasonably timed interview with producer Danielle Earl. Enjoy. I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you again, Danielle. I really appreciate you coming on to the show with me. I know that you are extremely busy, and we'll talk about all the stuff that you are working on right now. But first, let's do just a little bit of a self-introduction. Tell us about your background, your origin, and what being mixed race means to you.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, I want to tell you thank you so much for having me on your awesome show and everything. I'm so blown about what you're doing and the people that are interviewed before me. So, but I'm actually basically filmmaker, director, writer, producer. Originally from New York, from Bronx, New York, but I currently reside in New Jersey. And especially with my my origin, my family background, it's very mixed. Basically, from my mother's side, it's East Indian and West Indian. Also, father is originally from Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica, and also my mother, she's originally from here, but her brother was originally from Trinidad. My grandmother was from Trinidad, and she was white. So, and also my great grandmother was Irish. So that's a part of me too. Our family background.
I never even think about white Caribbean folk.
Yeah,
I know they were still lingering people there, but I never think about them being there.
It's true. Oh my God. And if you go to Florida, grandmother, I remember when I was younger, we went to get some patties, at a nearby Golden Crust. And there was actually, there's a white and Asian, Trinidadian, or not Trinidadian, Jamaican. It was just talking to Jamaican, this whole language and speech. And I was kind of, take it back too, because I've never seen that type of thing before. But, it's so diverse over there that a lot of people don't see, besides the commercials that come out for Jamaica.
So as you were growing up, what was your, what did you understand about your mixedness, given that you had a Caucasian grandmother and, blue eyes and everything, but your family was a mix of East Indian and West Indian and Trinidadian? What did you think of as a young person, what your identity was? So
yeah, I guess, with me, it's kind of been an ever changing or just discovery. Because when I was younger, I really, we didn't really see color or anything. So we're just grandma, this is the way she is. And I grew up with her. But later, when I was older, I would say maybe in high school or getting, older than that, I discovered, that my great grandmother, was Irish. We had family out there, and my father, we didn't really talk about because he, passed away at a young age, relatively, young guy. And then my mom, kind of had to raise, not sort of raise herself, but she grew up very quickly, I would say by the age of 16 and, growing up with my mother. So she kind of started to discover things too. She didn't even know that she had a sister, until she was in her 20s, almost.
Wow.
that she had a sister that's in Trinidad and, was raised by, a family out there. And, my grandmother wasn't able to be there for her or send her papers to come to the U.S. And, it was very sad that, what people had to go through during that time and
also not talk about it.
Yeah, that's it. It's my mom was kind of okay with it, it's but imagine if you come up with a different generation, kids would kind of freak out, a little bit. They're more vocal,
right?
To kind of discover all these different things and about their family. So yeah, it was an eye opener.
Did you? I remember you saying something about, I think it was in Baltimore or moving to New Jersey. There was something about someone seeing your grandmother and being is that really your grandmother?
Yeah. Oh, that was, it was weird. I would say, because I was in maybe high school around that time. Not high school. I would say in middle school, younger. Because my grandmother would come, if we had any functions or anything like that at the school, graduation. And so people would be kind of stunned, be that's my grandmother, with the blue eyes and everything like that. And it's just because the neighborhood that I grew up in Oakland, New Jersey and Bergen County, barely, at that time, the 90s, were barely any black families living in the town. It was very, if you were a black family, you lived near the river type area, which, because because they were just very like segregated in a way. But my mom was kind of like, you know, a rebel. She came to like the States from New York, and she was looking around for houses. And I remember that, you know, she was telling me the story that the realtor showed her all these houses are, you know, by the river down there, you know, because they had flooding. And, you know, she was like, no, you know, she went to look at the other house and it wasn't on his listing or whatever. And she was like, you know, I want to look at this house. This is the house that I want. And this is the one I'm going to get. and it was like, and at that time, people were like, oh, you know, this family, black family living on the corner, you know, type thing. And she was, you know, very vocal in terms of like politics and all that other stuff, and getting, you know, talking about more starting even a black, basically like an alliance or a black group that she would go door to door with the other black families and try to see ways to kind of, you know, help with the community and everything. And yeah, and that was during the time Al Sharpton came in early, I would say like late 80s or like early 90s. He actually came up to over here because there was a lot of black, you know, and white issues that were going on, and he was very vocal about it, you know. And it's like, yeah, so like, you know, I don't know what during that time, the 90s, they're more like radical. But yeah, you know, that's kind of like I kind of went on the tangent, but that's, you know, what I've experienced, you know, with that type of thing, you know.
So did you ever feel that you had a crisis of identity or something like, you know, some mixed kids do, or did you feel pretty comfortable with just how diverse your family was? You didn't really have to question that you were mixed, and more than anything, it was people's reactions to you versus your own sense of it.
I would, you know, I would say, you know, in the community that I lived in, I remember one time I was like in Girl Scouts. You know, I was young. I didn't even, you know about these things about segregation or anybody feeling, you know, feeling different from everybody. And I never even knew about it until my mom told me, you know, later on that, you know, we went to like Horseback Ranch. It was like this, you know, like trip that we went on. And so all the girls, you know, they stayed in like either like a hotel or a cabin type thing. And one of the parents talked to like the other mother, saying that I don't feel comfortable having Danielle in the room with my other kid, and they were all white. I was the only black kid that was there. And you know, and my mom, you know, she heard about it like later after the fact, like her and one of her friends spoke up. I said, well, I feel comfortable with Danielle being in the room. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what is your problem? You know, with her being? Yeah, and it was so like it was just that kind of like subtle type thing, and like, you know, oh yeah, I could tell you stories even with my, you know, my brother growing up too, when he was in, you know, teenager and in high school, and he actually there was a girl that was Italian that liked my brother, and you know, wanted him to come to the prom with her, and you know, he was a junior, and the father was very polite and everything, and he would said, well, I don't feel comfortable having any pictures or anything like that on my wall or anything, like, so yeah. And he like called family, and he was very nice, you know, and you see him, you know, later on in the supermarket, say hello, and this is how it was. And it's like, it's sad that, you know, it was like that. And you know, and it's like, seems like it's not much of a difference. Or
they're not shy about being overtly racist, which I used to always say, like, I would rather my races be overt and out in front of your face so that you knew which ones you didn't have to worry about them because you knew exactly who they were. But I'm getting to the point, it's so overt now that, you know, even people running for Congress are saying things like the Holocaust never existed and black people are all have sub brains and shit like that. And I'm thinking, what year are we in? I'm starting to miss the days when subtle racism was the thing and not the overt stuff, because it's just shocking how backwards it feels that it's going right now. So would you say that was probably your first experience with racism, the mothers not wanting to be in the room?
Yeah. And I think, and the thing is, it didn't trigger me because I was so young, you know, thinking about it, you know, and I, you know, just kind of did my own thing. And I was, you know, to me, you know, I remember one year I lived in Florida for like 1 year, and then I had family out there, but I went back to, you know, New Jersey and everything, but it was all totally different. It was more Hispanic, more, you know, blacks that went to the school, high school. And, you know, I was, you know, grew up in a predominantly like white neighborhood, and, you know, the type of music and the type of influence I've had is very different from like somebody, you know, upbringing in the culture of black culture and stuff like that. So when I came to like, you know, that area, it was kind of like, you know, you felt like a kind of like disconnect, but at the same time, there's a little bit more acceptance, I think, you know, in that way, because, you know, of your makeup and, you know, and I remember hanging out, all my friends were, you know, Hispanic. I said, you know, I hung out in that type of crowd, and I just, you know, I felt very comfortable, and, you know.
Did people think of you as Afro-Latina because of who you hung out with?
I think so. And it's very strange. I do have, and that's another thing. I do have like a family member that's, Cuban. So we did have that kind of like, Cuban influence and she also spoke the language and, especially with family gatherings and everything. So it was just a very, diverse, family, that kind of brought us attention to all different types of cultures and that we were kind of influenced on. So, so I felt kind of like connection with a lot of times. It's funny how it kind of like resonates to the projects that I'm working on now,
right? Yeah,
and everything else. Like So
it's funny because, and this is something I'm probably going to end up saying on every single episode. So I apologize to the people listening that they're going to keep hearing it. But in my case, I was raised more Black than anything else, culturally Japanese when I was at home with my mother's side. But other than that, or even with my mother, if I wasn't in my Japanese house, I was raised more around Black people, so I feel more Black. But because I present in this sort of ambiguously Asian, Latin kind of coloring and look, a lot of times people thought I was Dominican or Puerto Rican, especially if they're from the East Coast. They think I'm Dominican or Puerto Rican. If they're on the West Coast, they think I'm Mexican or Filipino. And so I would get this thing with people that if I didn't speak Spanish, I'd get this kind of reaction like, why don't you speak Spanish? And I was like, well, I'm not Spanish. Like it's not my language. And then it would almost be an offense. Like, well, shouldn't you be proud that you look like us? And I'm like, well, I mean, I look like me. I don't know. Like, I'm proud of what I am. But I always wondered if just because of some of the areas where you do kind of blend or look a lot like the people that are surrounding you, even though you're not necessarily made up of the same things, if you're just kind of assumed or if you're embraced or if you're because you don't speak Spanish or something like that, would you maybe be kind of on the outside of that?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, I don't speak, that's the thing. I only know a certain language because I was a teacher, back in the day. So in terms of like, talking, I used to have like maybe like it was 70% of, Hispanic at the school that I went to. And it was bilingual, and they didn't have teachers. They didn't have translators. So I had to basically like teach an art class on my own with all these different things, projects and everything like that. And just like hoping that, we could connect and for me to, learn. And I would just, the only thing, I was taught, it was like silencio.
That's
like,
what you needed.
Like all like, because I would have classes of like 35, 40 kids in one classroom. Man. And we would have like mergers of different classes. And so it was, insane. But I felt that connection in terms of the culture and everything. And just being up for my family, background, I think too. I think it has to do with like the island thing, because you have like a West Indian type thing. It's like those type of cultures kind of, have the same, upbringing, I think, like family unit. And it's
sure. Yeah. Well, that kind of segues into a little bit about like the kind of projects that you are working on in terms of your production experience. Did you kind of always sort of work on projects that tended to have some sort of racial bend to it or something? Or is that just kind of what's happening right now in your life because of what's going on?
That's a good question. Like, I would say it's kind of happening now more. Like in the beginning with Brooklyn is Love, I remember when I first did the first season and, I was like, some of the filmmakers were like, oh, it needs to be like more diverse. It needs to be more characters. Like I was so criticized by and I felt like, if I was like a white person writing this project, I don't think they would ask me that same question, because like it's been going on for how many years, and like we haven't criticized any like filmmakers.
Like diversity is when you add a brunette into the mix.
And that's the thing. It's like, and then but to me, I feel like there's a project, or not a project, but there's that TV show. I actually saw the documentary, and it's like a horrible show. If you watch it now, it's like so offensive, but it's Married with Children. I grew up.
Right. I grew up with it too.
Yeah. And there's a Black guy who was the creator of it. He had a cowboy hat. If you go look online,
I did not know that.
Yeah. And a documentary. I didn't see the other guy. So there's like two writers on the show, but I think it was him who kind of was the push on it. Really? And he had to get like a white writer with him to kind of get it on Fox and stuff. But he was the creator of the show.
Did he write it for a Black family and they put a white trash family in there, or did he write it for white people? incredible.
There was like a documentary, I believe it was on, I saw it on cable. It was like on CNN, or when they did those like behind the scenes type thing, and or just talking about the show because it was so iconic. But yeah, and he said that, you know, he wanted to make it about like a white family, and, you know, he was talking about the whole development and the characters and the actors. Yep. And like, you never saw his face. You never knew that this was the guy who wrote this, you know, big show. And if you go, even if you type out like Mary Trojan and put like the creators of it, you'll see a photo of him. And he's kind of like an odd, you know, guy, but he has like cowboy hat on, you know, like suspenders and like that. Like, he's just, yeah, and this writer, you know, it was like big time. He made a lot of money from that, you know, show. And so, yeah, and he kind of created this whole development. I thought that was like, wow. I mean, now that I see that angle from it, I thought it was just a white person writing this storyline.
Right.
It's like from a Black perspective, showing this struggling, you know, family. And, you know, and I think that, you know, in some ways, that's kind of like a brilliant thing to kind of show having a Black writer or having, you know, somebody talk about that type of thing and having a whole, you know, if you have a whole white cast or half white cast and, you know, have diversity there. I think that kind of opens more doors too, because, you know, that people automatically assume that we can't write for like white characters or we can only stay in our one box type thing, you know? Yeah. So yeah, you know.
We can only do urban, you know, street, hood. There's not just a regular old middle class, something that would even be more accessible to a middle class white family with what just so happens to have Black people there versus like something urban, which is what they would expect of.
Oh, totally. And even with like, you know, Shonda Rhimes and stuff, like for years, we didn't even know who like Shonda Rhimes was like for the first 2 seasons or maybe the second season, you know, until it started getting, you know, popular and people started to catch on. And then we saw photos of her, and she's been in like the business for so many years, like writing for all these different characters. And, you know, in Grey's Anatomy, I mean, you had maybe, you know, one Black or a couple of Black characters, and then you had the Asian, you know, character. And, you know, so it was like, wow, you kind of saw the person creator of this show, and it was beautifully written. It didn't have any, you know, ethnic type, you know, terminology. Even with the Black characters, they didn't come from the hood or anything. They were all like intelligent doctors that were working at this hospital. And, you know, and that's something that, you know, I kind of strive for, and I try to, you know, with projects that all the different projects, even with Jada the New York Effect, Complexity, or even, Haunted by Insomniac, I always want to try to show, you know, the dialogue and everything like that, showing people this is what it is. And this is kind of Black culture, and this is how we talk. We don't talk like all, you know, your image of what we are on television is like horrible.
Right.
Kind of in a way.
I will say something that I'm excited that Shonda did. And I didn't actually watch Grey's Anatomy. I think I've seen only a couple episodes because like a friend of mine was an actor on it or something like that for an episode. But I did start watching How to Get Away with Murder. And one of my favorite things that ever happened was that Viola went to bed with a head wrap.
Wow. I'm saying, oh yeah, I remember that episode. She kind of just like, you know.
Yeah, and it's like she would go from her, you know, nice put together wig, and the next thing you say, she's in a head wrap, and then she gets mad, she pops that sucker off, and it's just her natural hair. And I'm like, America, look at what is happening. You never seen that before. So I was really excited to see that, because that's when I took pride in knowing like this Black woman rose up in the ranks, put on all these TV shows that white people consume in mass, and then she gave you a head wrap on her next show. And that's one thing that I really like. I was really excited about.
It's so true. Like even with like Scandal and everything. Oh, and I was sad that it's ended, because it could have been on for more. Because I was just like starting to get into the show, but even with that, you know, I love the fact that she kind of created so many careers for a lot of, you know, Black actresses that, you know, haven't been able to get a lot, you know, very far in their career, you know, and sad because of, you know, the makeup, or maybe they were just, you know, a lot of white actresses, they kind of, you know, pushed forward. And even with Viola Davis was like phenomenal. And, you know, I was so upset that she didn't get like that Oscar for The Help. Like,
I'm sensitive about The Help though. I'm real sensitive about The Help.
It was tough, you know, movie to watch.
It is. Know, and I read the book, and the book is much better and actually tells the story. The book has has a mixed race storyline right smack dab in the middle of it. And they changed that up inside the movie so bad that I almost walked out, and I never walk out of a movie.
Oh my gosh. So it's a totally different thing. And like the book, I didn't even read the book. I have to like start, because it's like a different,
it is.
format there.
You have to have like a different mindset too, because I was so excited. I had read The Help and I knew it was written by a white woman, but I knew that it was kind of like loosely based off of experiences she had. And so the maid that she had grown up with had a light complected daughter. And so that daughter would come in and out and play with the kids. And so the main white character, was familiar with them and everything like that. But there's this huge scene in the center of the book that involves that the white passing daughter talking to a room full of white women without them knowing. And so, and it's the mother of the main white character. And I don't remember Skeeter or whatever her name was. I don't remember her name anymore. But the mother of her flips the fuck out and snatches that white passing girl out of there. And then it basically splits up the family. It puts the maid in a position of having to choose to stay with the family or not, or stay with her child or not. So they end up sending the daughter away. And so as a mixed girl, I was like, I'm not a biracial girl, but I definitely tend to feel more understanding where it comes to like the black mix or the passing or that kind of storyline speaks to me a lot. So I was ready to see that on the big screen. I was like, this is my scene. This is something that will speak to me. And then I watched the movie, and I remember coming out of the movie and sitting in my car in the parking lot, and it rained. And I'm just sitting in the car looking at my phone trying to decide if I was going to like Facebook rant.
That's crazy. That would have been such a good part of the story.
It was so significant. And in this case, they just kind of like they made the daughter dark, and she walks in and she's being all hoity-toity, and so they tell a totally different story. So when the woman is sort of like polite to her versus outright bigoted, and then does her thing in private, I was so angry because it just whitewashed, it just softened, this like significant part of that story. And I was surprised that even the author would have allowed, like, she wouldn't have fought harder for it. I mean, but I know how this stuff goes. You sign your rights over and everything like that. But that would have made me really mad if that was my work that they had changed. So I tend to be sensitive about it, even though I love Viola and Octavia, and I was excited to see like mature Black women headlining a movie and everything like that. I was still like, but if you read that book.
Right. That would have been a good tie into the story too, and they should have stayed true to it too. That's like somebody else's story they're putting up there.
Like you already sign up for knowing that you're about to watch a racially charged story. We're talking about the Black women that raised the white children of the South during the 50s and 60s. Like you already are expecting it to be uncomfortable for white people, and to just like, well, we don't want to make it all the way uncomfortable. That's where I just kind of like, I can get really sensitive about it. I want to be supportive of those two women, but I have a really hard time of being supportive of that film in particular.
Because, I feel like, the same way, well, I shouldn't say, the same way, but I never read that book, but it was like, how I felt with like 12 Years a Slave. I still haven't seen that movie because I can't see just with the Black people getting tortured. And I remember, meeting some of the actors, just my, friends that watched the movie. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go see like 12 Years a Slave. It's such a great film. And everybody was just like, so like, wow, this is great. And I'm like, I feel so bad because like it's part of like our culture, just seeing that side of history is just like, it's hard to watch, but it happened. It did happen,
It's hard to know that any period piece that exists for us, if it's more than 150 years old, is going to be slavery based. Like there's not, I'm sure there's stories out there of, triumphant and successful, Black people, but we just don't get those stories as much as we get the slave stories. And especially because at the time that like 12 Years a Slave came out, there was also, I guess off the heels of that was Birth of a Nation, which that's a whole nother thing. Like I would say that 12 Years a Slave was created with sort of a thoughtful lens, and the racism, while really painful to watch, is probably far more realistic and whereas Birth of a Nation unfortunately had the whole build up from Sundance and then the smackdown because of Nate Parker's history and everything like that. But But because like it forced us to have to side with that movie and be like, you know, they ostracized Nate Parker for something he was acquitted of, but here they have Casey Affleck is getting an Oscar for some shit, and he's, you know, he actually paid somebody off, and so it made us have to side up and be like, Birth of a Nation, yes, we support it. But if you actually watch that movie, it is terrible. Like the movie is not a good movie, and it forced us to side with it just because they used racism just to smack down Nate Parker, and that. But that was like back to back. That's all we have to deal with, and so either that or we're talking about civil rights era period pieces, which are also a different type of pain and violence to watch. We don't get the, you know, running down the hillsides and the white cliffs of Dover and all that kind of stuff of older England, you know, beauty type stuff. We're never going to get that. So it's tough when we're trying to figure out what sort of stories we want to tell, because we really can only tell modern stories if we don't want to invoke any of the pain of the past.
That's true.
All right, but yeah, so we were going kind of into the whole the climate has sort of kind of shifted the projects to sort of all be like this. But what got you started wanting to be a filmmaker?
That's a good question. I would say like, I shouldn't say failure. I'm just kidding. But I went to, I went to college. I went for animation and visual effects in San Francisco and at the Academy of Art University out there. And I wanted to go into like animation and like, I want to be an animator, or Pixar. Mm-hmm. Then I kind of just realized that, there's not much money into it. And, especially with animators, they pay them like less, your salary never goes up. It's like they kind of just warned us that.
Oh, really?
And, as students, they were saying that, because there's so many animators and now they're getting animators from like, different areas in India and all these different places, mm-hmm. and they pay them very little to work on all these different movies that you see right now. So, kind of, I still want, love, art and everything, but I've always loved filmmaking, ever since growing up. My mother was so I think influential because she loved watching like soap operas, shows like Heart to Heart, all these different. My brother was named after Jonathan Hart from Heart to Heart. I was named after Danielle from As the World Turns, Meg Ryan's baby, like because she was so like I don't know if it's an emotional thing, but hooked to like Aaron Spelling and all these different producers that really catered towards romance or drama type series that were just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And just the way of storytelling, especially for soap operas, how you can be able to create a project and have it last for like 40 years of like the same different storylines happening, new characters mm-hmm. coming in, replacements and stuff, and still people can watch it is just phenomenal. And so I was like so inspired by that I always loved to do it, but I was scared about doing it. And I started taking classes like an elective for like intro to filmmaking. Mm. And one of my professors there was like, oh, Dale, you should, definitely look into, taking classes after you graduate, maybe going back to filmmaking or, getting your master's or something. And I was like, really? I'm like, you think so? I'm like, do you think I'd be able to do it? Because there wasn't that many, female, filmmakers or producers really that you've heard of. It was always men in the forefront of filmmaking. And this is before Shonda Rhimes, all these different people. So I, when I went back from the academy and went back home and everything, and I started taking classes at City College of New York, and I did a web show called On the Scene. And so I started doing this like small, project with my little camcorder I bought for like $200. And I went to, all these underground places in Brooklyn, and this is back in like Occupy Wall Street, where the places in, and especially Williamsburg were never close to what is now with Starbucks on the corner and beautiful and everything. Like it was kind of deserted. And a lot of kids though from the colleges used to go because, it was just a very depressing time, at that time. And the music was just so, awesome. And I interviewed a whole bunch of artists, and it branched off to the UK, and the web show became very popular and having a following. Mm. And then so what ended up happening was, I was taking classes at the time, but, I ended up interviewing like Ian Axel, Great Big World. Now he's like this big top, person. He was like a student at NYU when I interviewed him. there's Chad, who's his manager. So he wasn't his sidekick singer. And then the other lady, Rachel Plackton, who became this big success, singer, for doing the promotions for Hillary, for the fight song. And so she, I remember sitting at her apartment. She was, a music teacher. She had a student, and I was waiting outside, and she played me some of her music, and I started recording it. And this is the person right before she ended up being signed. I remember in my car listening to her song on the radio, and I was like, this is the beginning of what I was doing. And then I was like, I started my own production company. I left school and I started my own production company, Peel Entertainment LLC. And I just took a gamble and started developing this series called Brooklyn is in Love. And it was really an influence from all the music and the bands that I went to do and interview to influence this show about young, late 20s, early 30s somethings that, are living in Brooklyn, trying to find love and during this whole kind of everything that's going on in their lives. And so I know, now there's so many shows like that, Brooklyn, but when I started it, there's kind of not many or shows that kind of catered towards that demographic. And this is kind of how I started. It's a long story.
Did the Brooklyn in Love, I remember you saying something about Brooklyn in Love, you got a little bit of criticism because it wasn't super diverse at the time or whatever, but did that make you start to think about diversity in your work, or was that just accidental?
Definitely. Especially as filmmakers, we always take either criticism or anything like that to help us, get better, I think, because you always have to look at the audience, the people that are watching your show, that you don't see, things in a certain way, but, they might take things, from what they're watching too. And so, and it's good, it's good to have criticism because it kind of makes you stronger and it makes you a better filmmaker, to try harder for the next thing. And you always want to have everyone's voices to be heard, especially, that's what I try to strive for in filmmaking and everything. And even with Brooklyn is Love, it was kind of it wasn't so much the diversity, but I remember there was even criticism in terms of, the LGBT storyline, especially with Brian, the gay character in the series. And I remember somebody messaging me and a friend of mine, I used to share all his information or his, film projects and stuff. And he would be like, oh, Daniel, I can't really share that, because of the subject matter and, what's in the show. Yeah. And this is before, the gay marriage and everything. So people were very a little skeptical because they saw a black, gay character, in the series playing a male prostitute that was a student at school in New York, and then being with these two girls, they're his best friends, and showing that dynamic because, what we, imagine and we see on television, and you watch Law and Order and all these different things in our culture, we kind of don't show that, I think, to me, that type of diversity of a black guy and a white person, two white characters, and they're best of friends. That does happen, and
also without it seeming like tokenism or feeling very false because it didn't, no one knows how to make black people and white people be friends on TV.
Right. So true. And the sad thing is there was other characters in the show, there was also a Nadia Serenas that was also a very big character in the series. She was in the main cast photos and everything like that everybody kind of forgotten about, and she was from Argentina, and she was big influence there. And there also was DJ Rodney, who's his roommate, Kevin's roommate, and he had a radio show, and he was kind of the influence of everybody listening to his radio show. He was a popular person in Brooklyn, and he was kind of Kevin's mentor, his best friend, and talking about Diane and everything. So it's sad because a lot of people were oh, there was not much of the diversity, but the next season, we definitely, I made that kind of a big influence, and we had a lot of Black characters. There was an interracial couple, especially with Diane and the architect Isaac, and you saw also Amy that ends up coming back, the character played by Nadia. She ends up being a love interest with Charlie, and so it was just I kind of raised the bar in terms of that, and kind of really gotten especially giving other opportunities, especially for a lot of the demographic and the actors out there, to be a part of something. But yeah.
Did you feel, because you got that criticism and kind of responded to it, did you feel that your work wasn't yours, or was it just something that kind of brought it to your attention? Oh yeah, I probably did this because all of my TV shows me white faces anyway, and so that's why I kind of wrote for white people.
Yeah, I guess whenever as writers we write based on what we're basically exposed to, I think, or write to things that we're used to, and I think during that time, even though I went to San Francisco and everything like that, and I got even more diverse, in terms of like meeting people from different areas, Hawaii and everything. It does have an effect to you and how you write and everything. To me, it's like I just didn't even see color or that type of influence or that being because of what films and projects I watched.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's diversity is important, and I always want to strive to that, and I've always had that in my mind and everything from Brooklyn is Love, the first season, even before that with On the Scene series, it was always a diverse in terms of musicians that I interviewed. There was Black musicians, and oh my God, there was Asian musician, especially with the Paper Raincoat. He was a music producer. Vienna Tang, other very popular musician. It's like I kind of just try my best to kind of always have that influence of diversity. I feel like in terms of diversity, it can go both ways. It can be like having a diverse in terms of crew of people that are behind the scenes creating this whole project. You can have like a whole Black crew, and you're making white characters and you're acting. And to me, I think that's just as enough strength in a project and enough influence. And I think that should be praised the same way to me. But sometimes it's like kind of goes off the wrong way.
Yeah.
In terms of that, especially a person of color, and you're creating this project, and you're having white actors, and you're working to them, and you're the one calling the shots and telling them how this is what you want for your project. It's like to me, I think it's amazing. At the same time,
yeah,
because how many years ago that never happened? Before it used to be like Black characters with the white faces or whatever. Kind of like having to cater towards white producers and people kind of showing them in like such a negative way. And like how many years ago? And then now it's like, oh, now you have a Black director and a person doing this, but showing a positive light in a lot of the projects that you're putting forward. I think is is great. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump over to now complexity. So how you and I connected is I posted on a Facebook group that is sort of like people of color in entertainment, and you responded to it. And from there, we kind of had our initial, back and forth email chat, but then I started to Facebook stalk you because I wanted to know who I was talking to. And I saw, I saw your post about complexity. I saw a couple of your projects, but complexity was the one that I sort of zeroed in on because colorism is obviously something that's going to come up from time to time on this particular podcast since we're dealing with mixed race. But it's also something that has been kind of on my mind a lot lately, just in two kinds of ways. One, in that in my issue of not presenting as Black as I am, and then also seeing things like the things that frustrate me, like you have a Black family cast in a white show, and it'll be like the parents are both dark or both light, and then all of the children are the opposite, or that there's not like multiple shades of family members. Things like that always kind of bothered me. Or just like making any of the darker people, whether they were East Indian or Black or Hispanic or Latin or Asian, that the darker ones were always in service of something, and the lighter ones were usually the ones that could like pull off being richer or more affluent or whatever. So that kind of stuff has been on my mind a lot lately. So I zeroed in on it when I saw it on your page, and then you and I finally got to talk, and then I also from you got connected to Melissa. So tell me first, like how you found out about the project, how you got involved.
Yeah,
how you feel about colors.
I was actually connected to Melissa probably for like the past year, and like we were both connected, and we we would IM each other like now and then, but she would always say like she's working on this project, and it was like going on for a couple months or more. I didn't know the subject or anything like that about it, but I saw a post in the POC and media or media group. It's who POC and media, and I saw the post and I was like, wow, she's like looking for a producer for this project Complexity, but I remember she was reaching me about doing like a DP position or something, and I reached out to her. I said, wow, you're doing this, like you're looking for a producer. I'd love to be a part of it. And so she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, like definitely let me know when you need like help or assistance, whatever. And so while she started kind of developing it, and then she reached out to me and she's like, would you like to have a cup of coffee or to meet up? I'm interviewing other producers and stuff, and we really got talking, and we really hit it off. And I loved what she was putting forward to the forefront. Really, I thought it was very inspiring, especially for, the younger generation and young girls that feel the same way and feeling kind of like left out. And, in terms of, colorism, it's not just with the, Latino community and Latinx community, but also Asian, and it's also an Indian, and everywhere, women mostly that feeling this kind of void and discrimination, and I was like, wow, I'd love to be a part of it. It was like, whenever there's something that, and you're right, like touches on a subject that may be a little bit uncomfortable, or just having that type of feeling of anything, really just moving, I always gravitate to, and I'm like, I have to be a part of that, project in some way as a producer at level to support it. And I love what she's, putting together for this. And we also just hired another producer, Crystal Roman, from Black Latina Movement. She's amazing. And I worked with her for Cecilia the Solibit. That's actually a short film I was the AD on a couple of months back. And it was a great production, really great crew and everything. And she reached out to me, Melissa, and said, I'm looking for another producer. And I said, definitely go with Crystal. And I got her in contact. I'm like, she has her own company, it's Black Latina Movement, really everything that she's like striving for. And she's been talking about colorism for like the past like 10 to 17 years or more, which her whole focus was to kind of show young girls and girls growing up that, your voices are being heard in our stories and our films. And that's kind of something that she's been always striving towards. And so like, yeah, even when I was working with her, I had such a blast. And she even reached out to me about directing her next project for it's like a TV show or TV series. So awesome. Yeah, so it kind of like worked out in that way. But yeah, I think, just how she was kind of putting it forward, she had a, a total foundation before even stepping up to doing Seed and Spark. She really knew what she wanted to do and how to kind of put it, that whole production forward with that and the push for the fundraiser. And I thought that was amazing. Somebody having that drive, I'll just, hang in there with her and really promote it every step of the way. So
yeah, I'm excited about the project. I know actually before the day before that we actually got to speak for the first time, you and I had looked on the Seed and Spark page and I watched the video and everything. And I was like, oh, I've got to these people I have to talk to. So I was really excited about it. Colorism, it's something that it's so surprisingly only our issue, even though even though it is something that was kind of done to us by if not white people or the lighter skin kind of thing being, they've told us lighter is better, and so now we are reacting accordingly. I still think that it comes as a surprise sometimes to white people or lighter skinned people when you have to bring up like, hey, a dark skinned person isn't lesser in some way, or you shouldn't just always cast the light skinned person as the Black representative for the show, because there's a lot of different ones of us, and I say that even coming from a light skinned perspective. So it is something that seems very personal to me, and I don't know how to tell my version of it beyond doing something like this, talking to you and talking to Melissa and other people of mixed race, and just saying, how did you feel growing up light skin or lighter skin? How did you feel when people would tell you you had the good hair, or they would try to touch your hair, things like that. Like, this is the way that I can kind of get out that colorism is a real problem in our community, both that we do it to ourselves and that it gets done to us. So the more that we talk about it, the more it raises awareness, and hopefully we start to see a shift in our culture.
Yeah, and even like I think there's a music video that somebody remade for like This Is America, and
yes, I got so upset when
I was like, I've never seen it on Facebook, and then I saw all these like comments, and like everybody was like criticizing it. It's true. It's like you're talking about like women rights and everything. That's a great thing, but I feel like even with that, like I just had a podcast earlier today, and that was a similar question he was mentioning about in terms of that, like we're talking about equality and with women in film, and do you notice that there is there kind of a divide? And I spoke up about it. I said that I do notice that there are great female directors that are white, but it seems like they're not pushing also POC and people of color crew members on their production team, and they have a big budget. A lot of them, they have like $30,000, $50,000, and they're able to get these resources, and they're not including people of color part of it, or even at the forefront. And it's like something has to happen. Like this is awesome women film, but like we also have to include everybody in that and have that type of and not just to have all female. I think it's awesome, but I think it's if female producers are at the forefront and directors, I think it should be equal and having like half male and half female, and having it inclusion so that way they can learn from that men and can see that, oh wow, there's like a female DP, there's a female sound person, and I can actually work with them, and it's like the same as a guy,
right?
Wow, okay, so I want to like continue on this journey with them. I think that's like a powerful movement.
That's an interesting point, because I've been a part of a few all-female crews before, a couple projects, and you feel kind of good when you're doing it. You're like, female, but they've also been, white driven. And look at what we say in our language. We say, we need to be more diverse and more inclusive. There's women and people of color, so who are the women then? Are they just white women? Well, we have to assume that because they tend to be in the forefront, and we have to assume it because you'll hear things like women and women of color, women and people of color. Like, so they always make sure that the of color is separate, first. And this is the way our culture goes, right? Even though technically black men had the vote before white women, black men weren't allowed to vote, and white women who were fighting for the vote were actually fighting against the black vote at the same time. They were fighting for the white woman vote and not the black vote. They finally get the vote, and then it's years and years and years later that we're starting to see, okay, now finally black people can vote without being attacked on their way to the polls, or it's not outside of even in our lifetime that people are being attacked for trying to do that. So our culture does this. Right now it's let's be more inclusive. Let's get women producers and directors and writers and da-da-da. And it's like, oh yeah, also don't forget those people of color over there. Let's, bring them in too. So it's one of those things, like we need white people to help us do this, right? White,
like even like Cecile Tyson, she mentioned a quote that said that, it's like white man, I think it was like white man, black man, I think, or white, white man, black man, white woman, black woman. Like black woman is like at the bottom.
Yeah.
In terms of like the media and like, production and stuff. It's so true.
Yeah, and it's like, and what would be the problem in doing it at the same time? Like, why can't but then it's also, how do we identify? Because when I really think about it, I think of myself as black before I think of myself as a woman. I honestly, I kind of think of myself as sort of black and then mixed and then a woman and then a bisexual. Like I keep going down the list until I start to really, I pulled the sum of who I am, so it comes up at the end, but it's still hierarchical. So I'm far more passionate about issues as they relate to black people than I am as issues that relate to the other races and ethnicities that I'm made up of. And then I'm far more passionate about those than I am about gender issues, and then so on and so forth. So I would say that probably being on the LGBT spectrum and woman is kind of even for me, but black comes first. But not everybody's like that. Some people would put their gender ahead of their race and things like that. So I guess it also depends on who's in the fight.
They're even talking about now, like kind of sudden, a sudden way, even with Pride Month and everything like that, they're also talking about that. Oh yeah, they talked about 70% or 77%. I shared it like on Facebook of characters in terms of like LGBT or white characters, and they said that only like a small percentage is all different races and POC, and it's like really have to change this in America. It's like it's still going on. It's still whitewashed in a way in terms of all that type of thing. And like you watch television and shows and stuff like that, but the only show that I've seen, I still have to watch the first episode, is Pose. I think it's Pose.
I haven't started seeing it yet, but I was, because I kind of want to binge it. I think I'm gonna want to binge it, so I haven't started watching it yet for that reason. But yeah, it's like I'm. It's so funny because I'm excited about these type of things. But here's the other part of it is wherever inclusion and diversity is absent, it forces me to not only consume but enjoy stuff that's subpar. So I remember like on the I don't remember what the gay network on cable was called or is called, but years ago, back when I had the channel, there was this really terrible all black male cast, like gay male cast show.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh my God, it's gonna come to me.
I don't remember what it was called.
Popular. Right.
But I remember thinking, this is terrible. But I watched it nonstop.
It was like Noah's Ark, I think.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
And I remember like half loving it and half hating it. And I loved it because I was seeing like gay men of color, like, okay, awesome. But at the same time, some of it was so just, if not always well acted, sometimes it was pretty campy, which you can kind of excuse campiness because the culture and things like that. But I was just sitting here going like, this is all I have, so I'm going to go ahead and consume it. But I know this is not the best thing in the world. It's so funny. Like it forces you to watch kind of like the not the best things just because it's available, because we need it in some kind of way.
And even like when you see like Moonlight, and that was kind of, like LGBT, film and stuff like that. It was beautifully made, and they talk about Black culture and like, LGBT, characters and, and like just about his life, kind of an outcome of age, type story or theme. But that was beautifully done, and how he put it together. But it's so true. It's like they don't, I'm hoping that there is a show, and that's kind of like what we're trying to do for Jaded the New York Effect. It's like has that same diversity, Black characters, Latino characters and stuff that are, at the forefront and really changing it. It's not, just going on stereotypes and stuff like that. That's, horrible. Like how I loved Ugly Betty. I love that show so much. And it's like, they kind of made fun of like culture, in like, like the Mexican or, community and stuff. And
the
like
sort of telenovela style.
Right. Yeah. And like made her, but later on it started to be really popular and everything. And America Ferrera, she, it's awesome. And, but yeah, it's like, but with Jaded, it kind of shows, this person from PR that comes up to New York and is a love story, that's really good. And even talks about his family, his father, his relationship with his father. And I think it touches on a lot of different, subjects that I think, people can relate to and, in a good way, I think.
Okay. I do think that we hit a good amount of time. We did pretty well. We didn't go too far off track, I think, which is probably pretty successful for both of us. I know we're talkers.
It's such a good topic that like it go on for hours.
Right.
And all this different stuff we can talk about.
That's what I say. Like, I hope that these aren't one and done interviews or anything like that, because not only do I feel like I'm getting an opportunity to connect with all these amazing mixed people doing all this amazing stuff and being able to say like, look, we can do this, we can do that. Selfishly for me, it's like, I'm growing my family. Like besides the mixed cousins and my sibling and stuff like that, my world is very monoracial. I live in a fairly white area, maybe kind of a little bit Asian. My husband, although half white, half Palestinian, grew up white, so he thinks and behaves kind of white. I don't get, I don't get a whole lot of exposure to a lot of people that are like me. So this is kind of my way of extending that. And I talked to someone like you or some of the other people I've talked to, and I was just like, I feel like I'm going to be connected to you for life in some capacity, whether it's you continuing to come back every time you have a project or anytime you just got an issue and an itch you need to scratch conversationally, or just now we know each other. And I think that's an amazing thing. And hopefully Militantly Mixed is not only just a podcast, but becomes somewhat of a movement in terms of uniting mixed people and celebrating both our diversity internally, but externally as mixed people across the world.
Right. It's amazing. And I love what you're doing and like even, just the topics and everything like that. So I'm like definitely going to, I want to pull more people in, filmmakers and stuff, and, to get the conversation, going and, with the show. That's awesome.
Yeah. Maybe we can do like a panel thing with a number of filmmakers or something down the road. That would be great.
That'd be great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, before we go, do you have any kind of parting thoughts, something you really want to get out there? Do you want to plug some social media stuff? Tell us how to find you.
Oh, yeah. I would say, so in terms of like social media, I have to update my website, but on PL Entertainment, you can usually go on www.plentertainment.com. You can see all the projects and stuff that I'm working on. And if you have Instagram, you can follow me. It's DE227 on Instagram. Instagram, and also I'm on Facebook, so you can always message me. Pretty much with all the projects, I'm always on social media trying to like promote.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Is DE227 having to do with the show 227, or DE your initials in the two?
I usually just do it so I can remember, because of my old age and like, my memory in terms of that. So like everything has to be like the 227 or like, that type of thing.
That's funny.
Remember.
That's cute. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate that, we've worked around our busy schedules to kind of reconnect. I know it's been a few weeks since we talked last. Thank you for connecting me to Melissa and exposing me to Complexity series. I'm really excited, and I want to be connected to that project every step of the way, however I can, from my little couch in LA, to be a support to you. And thank you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the program. This is great.
All right. Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.